On today's show, we're going to discuss and debate the biggest differences between Evan's personal top 150 and the ETR staff half PPR ranks. You can find both of those in Draft Kit Pro. But before we get into that today, have something important to share. As some of you know, Evan has been dealing with some, I'd say, pretty significant health issues over the last 1 to 2 years. First step in getting his health back on track is by getting stone cold sober. So Evan is going to be out of the mix for the next 45, 60 days as he works toward that goal. Content wise, Evan isn't going to be around during this time period, but he'll be back at ETR before training camps open in late July, well before peak drafting season. I'm going to throw it to Evan in a second. I just want to say that I could not be happier, more proud of Evan for making this choice. I know a lot of us are fighting similar things, and it's not easy to step up and actually do something about it. In fact, it's really, really hard. So, yeah, Evan, go ahead with anything you want to add or say here.
Yeah, so like for 10 to 12 years or whatever I spent at Roto World, you know, and we turned that into the best fantasy website in the history of mankind. You, me, Greg, RotoPat, Wes, I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't want to leave out anybody. Rich Rebar. I mean, it was incredible. But from my vantage point, what I needed to contribute and what I did contribute was for 10 to 12 years, I would get up every day at 8 o'clock, maybe go get like a coffee, maybe some McDonald's breakfast. I didn't want to spend any time cooking, and I would just work until I went to sleep every day for 10 years. And that was awesome because like we were at the top of the game. Roto World was at the top of the game at that time. But it especially towards the end at Roto World, it started to take a pretty significant toll on my health. I mean, I ballooned up to like 320 pounds. It's an extremely sedentary lifestyle, and it's like dangerous. My brother wrote for baseball for a long time. He ballooned up. He recently left NBC. He became a mailman,
Hmm.
and he during the first like 2 or 3 months, he lost 40 pounds because he started moving. You don't move in our job unless you force yourself to. When you're not working. But I was working all the time. You know, so a year, and I didn't go to the doctor for like 8 years, and finally I kind of worked up the courage to go to the doctor a year ago, and I'm diabetic. And I changed a lot of things in my life after that, but I didn't change everything. And what I need to do is I need to change like everything. I have to be extremely meticulous because as you mentioned, I had I got this salivary gland infection, and I went to the hospital for 7 days during the season
Mm-hmm.
last year. And then it didn't fully go away, and I had to go back to the hospital again for 4 days in like March or whatever it was. And I can't keep going to the hospital. I mean, it's like costing me money. It's like expensive, and it's obviously costing me time, and it cost the subscribers a matchup column last year. So I'm going to go away for hopefully closer to 45 days and not 60, and just get completely healthy, detach for a while, and get in really good shape, lose a bunch of weight, and come back. It's the perfect time to do it because there's really nothing that happens between the draft and training camp at this point. The off-season program has almost been all but eliminated in the NFL, and I'll be back no later than July 15th. Um, but I'm like, at first I was scared to take this step, but I've received like so much support from you, Taylor, everyone at ETR, and and my friends and family as well. And I'm like, at this point I'm like excited to do it.
I mean, I, I would just add that, like, it's really going to suck not having Evan on the show in the short term. Like, I fucking love doing this show with Evan. I think he is actually like the best at doing podcasts about this stuff. But that's a short term thing. In the long term, it's like painfully obvious this is 100% the right decision. And not just for ETR, which is obviously really important to both of us, but it's the right decision for what matters most, which is Evan's health. Like, on a personal level, I really do love Evan. And I really feel the last few days, I felt an overwhelming sense of like relief and happiness that he's doing this. Cause I was like legit worried, like legit worried for him about his health, not worried about ETR, like legit worried about his health. So I felt like so much relief and happiness that he's doing this. And I know it's like a really hard thing to do and a really hard thing to talk about publicly too. So yeah, just so happy you're doing it. And yeah, I'm fine to end it there unless there's anything else you want to say. But yeah, go ahead if there's anything else you want to say.
No, I woke up, my birthday was I turned 41 on Saturday and woke up Sunday morning. I was like, I'm going to make a move.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do that. But let's talk about football. All right. Jesus.
Yeah. Well, one more thing. In terms of this podcast, we're not stopping, right? We're going to continue as normal while Evan is out. We have a bunch of plans. First up is a best ball series with me, Leone, and Herzig on a bunch of topics, our best ball rankings, some advanced concepts, backdoor stacks, strategies to employ, etc. So stay tuned for that. But again, the podcast is not stopping. We'll certainly be thinking about Evan, though, each time we do one. All right. Let's get started here with the football stuff. Evan, you released your first top 150 rankings of the 2024 fantasy football season today, Wednesday, the 15th of May. It is obviously very, very early. No one is drafting their season-long fantasy football teams for multiple months. Thought it would be a good idea to talk about where your initial rankings differ most from the ETR staff half PPR ranks. And to be clear, the ETR half PPR ranks, which you will find in DraftKit Pro under the NFL tab, those are effectively a meld of all of our opinions, including Evan, and our season-long projections, whereas Evan's top 150 is just his personal top 150. All right, we're going to do 20 today, 20 guys that Evan has a pretty big stand on against the ETR staff ranks. Starting with number 1, Josh Jacobs checks in at 13th overall for Evan. ETR staff ranks are at 29 overall. Now, 13 overall is going to open some eyebrows here, Evan. Talk to the people about having Josh Jacobs this high.
Josh Jacobs has been a little bit of an up and down performer during his career. There have been times where I just thought he was closer to replacement level. He had one year where he was sensational. So that gives me a little bit of pause, but the positives are so strong here. He's proven himself year over year that he is a true workhorse back. I love this offense. I mean, I think that investing in the Packers offense, the trajectory of this offense is skyward, no question. Jordan Love is getting better, and all those young receivers. The situation is so strong, and he has shown that he can handle really heavy workloads.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that, Matt LaFleur has talked about this. That's one of the reasons that they signed him. It's because they feel like they can give him the ball a lot. They could not do that with Aaron Jones because he was, often injured.
Yeah. And Josh Jacobs feels like he's been in the league forever. He's still only 26 years old. And as Evan said, he has shown an ability to carry huge workloads over the course of a season. My biggest concern on Josh Jacobs would be twofold. First, he hasn't been that good outside of that insane 2022 season. Like, he just hasn't been that good. And second, I do like this Marshawn Lloyd kid that they drafted, and we'll get to him more in a second. And
I'm above market on Marshawn Lloyd too.
And we'll get to him later when we get to some of Evan's sleepers that he's higher on than ETR ranks. And I like being higher on Marshawn Lloyd. So for those two reasons, I'm probably closer to where the ETR ranks have Josh Jacobs, but you could see it going really, really well if this offense ascends and Josh Jacobs is like an 80% of the running back touches type guy. Let's keep it moving to the second discrepancy. DJ Moore, 18th overall for Evan. ETR staff ranks are at 30th overall on DJ Moore. Obviously, DJ Moore coming off of an absolutely sensational season despite the struggles that Chicago had at the quarterback position. Evan, talk to the people about being so high on DJ Moore, even though they added Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze.
Yeah, the Keenan Allen addition, because he is just such a target vacuum, is certainly, a little bit of a concern. They're changing quarterbacks. I think Caleb Williams is going to be awesome, certainly better than Justin Fields. This ranking is going to correlate with me being lower than the ETR staff on Rome Odunze,
Mm-hmm.
who we're going to get to eventually. But see, to me, this is going to be the second year in a row where I'm higher than the ETR staff on DJ Moore, and that went pretty well last year.
Yeah.
I thought DJ Moore was a top 5 NFL receiver last season, 96 catches, 1,364 yards, 8 touchdowns. And he's another guy who he's in his absolute prime. And I also think that this offense is going to throw the ball a lot more than the Justin Fields offenses. And that's really going to work to the benefit of DJ Moore, and I think Keenan Allen is a really nice pick as well.
Agreed. Well, let's talk about Odunze now in alignment for a second here. Evan has Odunze at 102 overall. ETR ranks are much higher, 63 overall on Odunze. It's a tough thing for me on Odunze. Like I think he's an awesome talent. I want to close my eyes and just bet on it. At the same time, he has a ton of target competition and a rookie quarterback. So yeah, how do you think this whole Bears thing goes, and why so low on Odunze?
And it's going to help that they're going to throw a lot more, because that pie is going to enlarge in.
Sure.
And so I think Rome Odunze will have good games. I think ranking him 102 is really solid. 102 overall in an offense where he has to compete with a guy who was a top 5 receiver in the NFL last year, a proven year-over-year target vacuum, a rookie quarterback's best friend type in Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet, who has turned into a pretty solid tight end, especially in the red zone over the last couple of years. So I understand how it might seem like I'm being a little bit conservative, but in this particular situation, I think 102 is a real solid ranking.
Okay, I will say that in our staff rankings, we're trying to, and we are ranking guys based on progression of role. In other words, like the data is very clear. Rookie wide receivers see their roles expand and play much better towards the end of the season, where all the money is in fantasy football. So that's one reason that I think we're a little bit higher on Rome. Early season, I would definitely agree. I would probably have Rome around where Evan does, just for that early season type.
I could definitely see Rome, just progressing as the season progresses. One more thing, when you look at just the complexion of the offense as a whole, the Bears offense as a whole, they signed DeAndre Swift to a lot of money. DeAndre Swift is not like a between the tackles grinder or pounder. Like, the offense is set up to throw the rock.
Yeah.
And so again, I think Rome Odunze will have good games. I want to stay really high on DJ Moore, and obviously account for Keenan Allen.
Let's get to a guy who's been tough for me here in the early going. Devon Achane, 22nd overall for Evan. ETR ranks are a little bit higher, 17 overall. It's just hard for me to be like, I'm going to windmill this guy in the second round, when his likeliest outcome is, I don't know what you think, Evan, 10 to 14 touches a game. So talk to the people about Achane. You're actually lower than ETR ranks on Achane by 5 spots.
I can't believe it. I have him as like a lock, a virtually locked in second round pick.
Yeah.
It was Dane Brugler who compared him to Javid Best. And people will remember Javid Best for dropping out of the league due to concussions. But man, when that dude was healthy, goodness gracious. And I think a valid comparison is Chris Johnson. Now, these guys are really unique talents, but I'm betting on Devon Achane being a unique talent. They added Jalen Wright, but Jalen Wright couldn't earn consistent carries throughout his college career, has a lot of flaws. Raheem Mostert is getting old. I mean, he's 32 years old.
Yeah.
And just the way that Mike McDaniel calls offense, that really plays to the strengths of Devon Achane. And I want to be aggressive on Devon Achane. I guess I'm going to have to get more aggressive to catch up to the staff.
I mean, it's such a hard thing for me, man, because I think Devon Achane is obviously looks like after his rookie year an outlier. We're talking about 7.8 yards per carry as a rookie. Totally freakish. 8 touchdowns on 103 carries. both of those are completely unsustainable, but at the same time, he can still regress in those and be a massive, massive outlier. It does concern me a little bit that even when Mostert was hurt last year, they didn't like go nuts on Achane. They still played Jeff Wilson and some other guys in that backfield. So I don't think you're going to get more than 13 touches per game from Achane, and you just have to decide if that's okay for you in the second round. I'm still a bit wishy-washy on it for now. Let's go to Michael Pittman, fourth discrepancy here. Michael Pittman, 25 overall for Evan. ETR ranks are lower at 37 overall. I think the biggest concern for us is A, throw rate with A-Rich, and B, when A-Rich threw last year, and it was a small sample, but when he threw last year, it wasn't that pretty, man. I mean, he was not completing passes at a very high rate. Pittman obviously went completely off when Gardner Minshew was in there. So, Evan, talk about being higher than ETR staff on Michael Pittman by 12 spots.
Well, the Colts did add A.D. Mitchell, but I don't think that he profiles necessarily as a big-time target commander. The Colts did not have a high throw rate last year when Anthony Richardson was under center, but they did play really fast. So if they expand that throw rate, I think that's obviously going to help Michael Pittman. And also, I think that they run an extremely RPO heavy offense where Michael Pittman is consistently the first read, and he does a lot of high percentage stuff, and he catches everything. So I think he has a really high floor. And they also gave him a very big extension this offseason. So they're committed to him. I think they're going to continue to feed him. And if we get, a year, I know that a lot of it is based on rushing, but if we get a year where Anthony Richardson finishes a top 5 fantasy quarterback, which is how we all have him projected right now, I mean, I think that he's going to bring someone with him, and that's very, very likely to be Michael Pittman as opposed to the rest of the Colts pass catchers.
Yeah, if you guys caught Market Monday, I talked about my thoughts on this situation a little bit. I love A-Rich so much, and I agree with Evan. I want to stack him with someone. Michael Pittman is very expensive. A.D. Mitchell is very, very expensive right now as well, so we'll see how that plays out. Fifth spot is the elite tight end. So Evan has Laporta and Kelce back-to-back. Laporta 32, Kelce 33 for Evan. ETR staff has Laporta 45, so much further down. But Kelce right there at the same, 33. I mean, well, I'll let you go first on this, Evan. Why Kelce? Why Laporta over Kelce? And I'm not even saying I disagree with you, but why Laporta over Kelce? And any thoughts on elite tight end?
Well, I would like to have the staff answer for this terrible ranking. I mean, I like mine a lot better. Sam Laporta is over a decade younger than Travis Kelce. I still think that they're already actively limiting Travis Kelce's snaps, except for they want him healthy for the playoffs. They're trying to win another Super Bowl, so I don't think that that's going to change. He may even be more limited this year. Sam Laporta was a wreck. We often talk about how rookie tight ends struggle to adjust. Sam Laporta did not. He was a record breaker. He broke a ton of records as a rookie tight end, and I don't think that this offense is going anywhere. I mean, I think that this Lions offense is here to stay as a juggernaut. They just extended Jared Goff. They play a ton of games indoors. I mean, Sam Laporta can be better than last year. I don't think that Travis Kelce is going to be better than he was last year.
I'm going to make a note to go over this spot one more time because I kind of agree with you on Kelce. I mean, he's going to be 35 in October. His average depth of target was down to 7.0 yards last year. I mean, that's been on a wild decline, but yards per route run was still solid. But they added so many good pieces. I mean, Marquise Brown, and they drafted a tight end, and Xavier Worthy. And so you can see paths to Travis Kelce not handling as big of a workload here. The Laporta stuff, it's just opportunity cost in that part of the draft for me. Do I want to spend the third round pick at tight end on Sam Laporta? That's something I'm thinking through right now. My answer is probably no in the best ball stuff, but yeah, I think it's okay. Let's get to the sixth spot here. Saquon Barkley. This one surprised me a little bit. Evan is lower than ETR staff on Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, 34th overall for Evan, the RB10. ETR ranks at 25th overall on Saquon Barkley, the RB8. So a little bit below market here on Saquon. Evan, talk to people about the new Eagle running back.
So I would start with the tush push is a concern. What is the touchdown upside for Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia? I know people have speculated that Jason Kelce retiring, maybe that means that they're not going to do the tush push as much. I don't think that that's the case. They're kicking Cam Jurgens in, who they drafted, I believe, the second round a couple years ago. He's going to become the new starting center. They still have a powerful offensive line that Jalen Hurts can, make that move behind. And then they have other backs that they play. I know they gave Saquon Barkley, relatively speaking, a lot of money, but the coaching staff has long had this weird infatuation with Kenneth Gainwell. They used a 4th-round pick on Will Shipley. So they can use, there are a lot of runners here to contend with, including Jalen Hurts. What's the touchdown upside? That's the big thing for me. Touchdowns dictate so much in fantasy football, and they're really hard to project. But I'm more worried about his touchdown projection than any of the running backs ahead of him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The thing about, I agree with you that they're going to keep tush pushing Jalen Hurts. I mean, this is what this guy does the best of anyone in the league. Like other teams have tried to do the tush push. You don't have Jalen Hurts, it's not going to be as successful. And other teams have found that out, I think. And so I think they're going to keep doing the tush push for sure. I agree. It just comes down to how many times do they get tackled at the 1-yard line, or because if they're at the 4 or the 5, Saquon is going to get the ball. But at the 1, it's probably going to be the tush push. So let's go to 7th discrepancy. Zamir White, 59th overall for Evan. ETR staff at 77 overall on Zamir White. Talked about this one on Market Monday also. The commitment to Zamir seems strong, right? Only thing behind him is Alexander Mattison on like a nothing deal, and Dylan Lobb, 6th-round pick, Amir Abdullah, career special teamer effectively. So workload looks good for Zamir. Evan, people are going to say, this is like the Alexander Mattison situation. He's going to get a big workload, but he's not that good, blah, blah, blah. What do you think about being above market on Zamir White?
Yeah, well, at least I'm not ranking Zamir White like 30th overall like I had Alexander Madison. That was a big miss, and I understand. I'm sorry to the people. Zamir White, yeah, so he is the type of back that it's fairly easy to miss on, because we're working off. Although he was, Antonio Pierce was like committed to pounding him between the tackles last year. He, we're working off a small sample size there. He did have touch counts of, oh my God, where would I have him?
Oh God, he was getting 23 touches a game. Yeah.
Yeah. Over the last 4 games, 20, 22, 25, 26. Antonio Pierce loves this guy. They added Alexander Mattison, and that's it. Oh, I guess they drafted every spreadsheet socialist favorite running back, Dylan Lobb, in the 6th round. We'll see if he makes the team. But the competition here is very light. I love how Antonio Pierce, and Coach Speak Index has highlighted this, talks about exactly how many touches he wants to give to the running back on a weekly basis. And he's just committed to his running back hitting that number. And he stayed that with Zamir White. But again, Zamir White, kind of a questionable talent. We're working off a small sample, not a great receiver. He is the kind of back that it's easy to miss on. I just think that inside the top 60 is good for him because his workload upside is so strong under Antonio Pierce.
Yeah. And in these 0 RB builds, I talked about it. Like, I'm fine with Zamir White as part of 0 RB builds where he goes super late. He's going in the 70s, in the 80s. Like, that's a smash to me right now. When you get into the 50s, it's a little bit tougher because the opportunity cost with the wide receivers there. But yeah, I believe Antonio Pierce. I think they're going to give him every opportunity to touch the ball 15 to 20 times a game. Another running back in the 8th discrepancy here, Jonathon Brooks, 70th overall for Evan. Of course, the rookie Jonathon Brooks of the Panthers. And then ETR ranks at 90th overall. Jonathon Brooks coming off of the ACL. This is pretty high, Evan, I think people are going to say this is pretty high for a running back coming off an ACL on one of the worst teams in the entire NFL. Go ahead on Jonathon Brooks.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be better, though. They were terrible last year, and I think that the only direction they can go is up. I like Dave Canales a lot.
Mm-hmm.
and they made Jonathon Brooks the first running back drafted, and it wasn't by like a very small margin. It was like about 20 picks,
And traded up to do so.
and traded up to do so. And I believe that they would love to part with Miles Sanders, and Chuba Hubbard is just, he's the definition of a replacement level back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they've invested heavily into their offensive line. They used the first round, the really high pick on Ike Ekwonu a couple years ago. Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt were massively paid in free agency. Taylor Moton's one of the better right tackles in the league. And I think that they are going to be a run-heavy team featuring Jonathon Brooks. Now to the ACL, which occurred on November 11th, kind of late in the season. It's been reported in multiple places that the Panthers think that Jonathon Brooks is going to be ready for week 1. He's super young, and ACL recoveries continue to get better with the passage of time. So maybe he'll start a little bit slow, but I think he can absolutely be a difference maker beginning in like week 4, week 5, and just take off from there. It seemed like an almost consensus, at least among teams, that Jonathon Brooks was the best back in the draft.
And that just speaks to what's going on with ACL recoveries. Like when Evan and I first started doing this, if you got an ACL tear and you were running back, it was like, forget it. Like we'll see you in a couple of years, maybe. Now these guys are coming back in 6-7 months and looking really, really good. So, kind of have to get that ACL bias out of my head a little bit. 9th discrepancy is an interesting one. Jameson Williams, 74th overall for Evan. ETR ranks 103rd overall. So I have one concern. I've tweeted about this already. I have one concern on Jameson Williams. I presented the bull case on Twitter. I have one concern, which I'll get to in a second here. But Evan, you are very high on Jameson Williams here. Go ahead on him.
Well, I certainly don't want to be late to the dance, especially in this area of the draft. I mean, we're talking about somewhere between like the late 5th and 7th round. I mean, a guy that has the ceiling of Jameson Williams, as you have done, go back and look at his college highlights. Look at what he did when he got the ball this past year. I don't, in this range of the draft, like I want to be higher than consensus for sure and stay higher than consensus on a talent like this in an offense like this. This is his target competition in Detroit for perimeter receiver work. Khalif Raymond, Donovan Peoples-Jones, a bunch of guys. And we know that Jameson Williams is much, much more talented than those guys. And I think he might be a little inconsistent. Jared Goff is a quarterback that works the middle of the field better than, as well as almost any quarterback in the league. I mean, you can look at the numbers that Amon-Ra St. Brown, the slot, and Sam Laporta, the tight end, have put up. But no more Josh Reynolds, I think that they want Jameson Williams to take off, and I am not going to be late to that dance.
So there's so many people out there that want to give up on Jameson Williams already. He is 23 years old still, and remember, he tore his ACL January 10th, 2022. He's only been a 60% snap player, 70% snap player in best case scenarios. He could be a 100% snap player this season, which I think makes a big difference. So that's the bull case. The bear case is what Evan mentioned. People are going to say Jameson Williams is best going deep, and that is where Jared Goff struggles. In fact, it's hard to project Jameson Williams for a ton of targets because we're giving so many targets to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. And I think that's the discrepancy in the ranking here. It's just, I don't know how much volume Jameson can get from Jared Goff. If he had a different quarterback, my God, it would be completely wheels up. So yeah, what do you think about the volume for Jameson, considering the competition and the way Jared Goff plays?
I think it could be a little up and down, but he has so much big playability, and again, this is a team that plays a ton of games indoors. I'm willing to bet on the talent here. I mean, especially at this area of the draft. I think that ultimately his ADP is going to fall a lot closer to where I have him than where the staff has him, and I think the staff might have to come up on him a little bit.
Yeah, I've been taking Jameson ahead of ADP in a ton of best ball drafts that I've done so far. Certainly like that as of now. We'll see where his final ADP for redraft ends up. And by the way, like guys like this, Achane and Jameson and Kittle, guys that are likely to be inconsistent, but when they hit, they hit in a way that literally wins you the week or literally wins you your league, like when they hit, that's super valuable, right? So like you have to be at times willing to live with these guys in some of the valleys to get the peaks.
Chris Wessling, the late great Chris Wessling, he had a theory. I think he wrote an article on Roto World about it a long time ago. All those articles have been lost, but don't get me started on that. Our life's work down the drain. Chris Wessling wrote an article about stop worrying about consistency and just try to stack players that can give you those winning weeks, and then when they have their down weeks, you have other guys who can blow
Sure.
up. I mean, GPP players probably think a very similar way. Best ball players, as that has become a much more popular way to play fantasy football, they kind of think that way. So just stack the week winners, and Jameson Williams can be a week winner.
All right. Speaking of guys that everyone is sick of, 10th discrepancy is Kyle Pitts. Evan is lower than ETR staff on Kyle Pitts. He's at 78th overall, the tight end 7. ETR staff 51st overall on Kyle Pitts, the tight end 4. One note I want to make here, Evan, before I let you go. After the season, Kyle Pitts put on Instagram, something, I'm so happy, or thank God that I was able to play 17 games despite undergoing PCL and MCL surgery the previous offseason. We knew about the MCL. We did not know that Kyle Pitts had also had PCL surgery ahead of last season. And so now the narrative out there, which I'm kind of buying into a little bit, is that one of the reasons he was so bad last year is because he was fighting this PCL thing. Obviously, he was fighting a lot of other stuff with Arthur Smith and the quarterback play, et cetera. But I just want to put that out there. But yeah, go ahead, Evan, on your current thoughts on Kyle Pitts. I genuinely think the public is going to be way more on your side here than ETR staff. People are just had enough of Kyle Pitts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you guys are taking the staff is taking a very optimistic stance here. And I think making maybe too many assumptions. And I hate to say this about a Mackey Award winner, but and especially a guy who had 1,000 yards as a rookie tight end.
Yeah,
I just don't know how good he is. I mean, he hasn't produced over the last couple of years, and I don't know. There's too many unknowns here for me to be aggressive on a tight end who I don't trust as a player. New coaching staff.
Yeah.
Are we sure that he's going to be fully recovered? You remember PCLs can suck, man. You remember Brashad Perryman, and he had a bunch of issues that contributed to him being a flop. But one of them was a PCL.
Yeah.
And that can be a debilitating injury for multiple years. I'm with the general public then, I guess, and I'm in. See it, and once I see it, then I'll believe it with Kyle Pitts.
So one reason that we have Kyle Pitts so high is just systemic stuff. We have Atlanta's pass rate going through the roof with Kirk Cousins. We also have their efficiency in the pass game going through the roof with Kirk Cousins and the coaching change. So that's one reason, I think. And then, yeah, I'm worried that Kyle Pitts can't beat defensive backs. You have to scheme him. Every other, tons of good tight ends get matched up on linebackers all the time. You got to get Kyle Pitts on linebackers or safeties, not cornerbacks. He's way too many targets deep down the field against cornerbacks. He's not going to win there. I think we've established that. So hopefully the new staff will get him going. 11th overall. Big discrepancy here. Chris Godwin down at 83rd overall for Evan. ETR ranks at 55th overall. Again, this is a spot where ADP on Chris Godwin is around where Evan is, 70s, 80s, something like that. We are much, much higher on Chris Godwin. I think a reason for that is TD rate has been so incredibly low. Last 2 seasons, Chris Godwin has caught 187 balls and scored 5 times. We're projecting that to regress. He's also going to go back to the slot. He has not played enough slot He did not play enough slot last year under Baker. So those are the 2 reasons to be optimistic. Evan seems a little bit more pessimistic. Go ahead on Chris Godwin, Evan.
Yeah, and Chris Godwin has been good to us over the years. I mean, you legit became like friends. I mean, you guys hang out, right?
We hang out all the time. Yeah, we're close personal friends.
Yeah, I mean, he has had games where he put babies in bottoms over the years, and he hasn't been that good over the last 2 seasons. And I think that some of it, he was like legit bad actually in 2022, but that was coming off that the double knee injury.
And that was with Brady. It was with Brady. Yep.
Yeah, the double knee ligament tear. And last year he was a little bit better, but didn't have big games until the very end of the season. Maybe that was a part of him finally getting healthy. It's a big red flag to me that they used a 3rd-round pick on Jalen McMillan, who projects as a slot receiver. And I know that they have said publicly that Chris Godwin is going to go back to the slot, but then they draft a slot receiver like with a fairly high pick. That's a red flag to me. There have been some rumors that he could get cut or traded.
Yeah.
They have a new offensive coordinator there. Just a little bit too much uncertainty for me right now with Chris Godwin. And if maybe he's a guy that I will, as we get closer to the season and it becomes clear like he's going to stay on the team, and maybe we get some reports that he's working in the slot, and is clearly ahead of Jalen McMillan, then I'll move him up. But right now, I'm being very conservative on him.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more optimistic on Godwin, but I definitely understand the concerns. The one that I disagreed with most, and I actually agreed with Evan on a ton of these moves, the discrepancies. The one that I disagree with most is the 12th discrepancy here. Dontayvion Wicks, 87th overall for Evan, the wide receiver 46. ETR staff has Wicks down at 145 overall, the wide receiver 66. I mean, they have Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks. Bo Melton gave them good games last year. They also have Musgrave and Kraft at tight end. And so you're asking a lot to support all of these guys. Maybe I'm still too optimistic on Christian Watson, but yeah, Evan, go ahead on Dontayvion Wicks in the mess. I think most people just consider this like a mess of a receiving core.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think I'm actually higher than consensus on Christian Watson. At least I want to be, because I think that they have the ability to figure out his hamstring problems, and they're obviously working on that. But again, I really want to invest in this offense almost in any way that I can. Matt LaFleur last year public compared Dontayvion Wicks to Devontae Adams, which is a hell of a comparison. The trajectory of the offense going up. Jordan Love, I think, can continue to improve. I think he's like an MVP candidate this year. And I think that Dontayvion Wicks has a chance to be the best receiver on the team. Again, that's how Matt LaFleur was talking about him last year. Christian Watson obviously has the injury issues, but again, I'm optimistic that they can figure something out with him and he can become a dangerous perimeter player. Jaden Reed is kind of like, I like him, but he's kind of like a gadget guy.
Yeah.
And he had 10 touchdowns last year. He ain't going to repeat that. And I mean, I like Bo Melton. That's a great pickup by that organization to find that guy. But he's like a 4th receiver. So I think that what I'm doing here is I'm betting that Dontayvion Wicks emerges as the Packers' number 1 receiver, Jordan Love's number 1 receiver this year, and that would carry a lot of weight and a lot of box score upside.
That is a contrarian take. Where ETR staff and Evan agree is that we think the Jaden Reed hype has gone too far. Jaden Reed is going in like the 40s or the 50s in a lot of this best ball stuff. Evan has Jaden Reed down at 71. ETR staff also lower on Jaden Reed. Dontayvion Wicks become the number 1 receiver is a super contrarian take. I wouldn't rule it out. I would consider it pretty low probability, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how all this goes with the Packers because it's certainly exciting.
Well, then who's the number 1 then?
Well, I still would consider Jaden Reed, Doubs, Watson probably more likely to emerge than Wicks. But
wow, Doubs?
Maybe not. We'll see. All right. Let's get to all this Cowboys stuff. I like these from Evan. Evan has Brandon Cooks 90th overall. ETR staff at 135. Evan has Jalen Tolbert at 146 overall, the wide receiver 66. ETR ranks way down on Jalen Tolbert, 285 overall, wide receiver 96. And then Zeke Elliott. Actually, let's do the receivers first, then we'll get to Zeke. So yeah, Evan, seems like you're just simply higher on Cowboys pass game than staff is right now.
So I think that the Cowboys are going to throw the ball a lot this year. I mean, I think that Dak Prescott could lead the NFL in pass attempts. He himself is not really much of a runner anymore. Their talent at running back is piss poor. I mean, Zeke Elliott is on his last legs, although I'm going to end up higher than the staff on him. Rico Dowdle is probably more just a guy. They are short on talent in the pass catcher core, aside from CeeDee Lamb, who I have as the number 2 overall player. I think the staff has him as the number 2 overall player
Yep.
for 2024 as well. But I mean, Brandon Cooks is like completely unchallenged as the Cowboys' number 2 receiver. Again, on a team that plays in a dome, is going to throw the ball a lot. I know that the staff really likes Jake Ferguson, which I mean I kind of get, but I mean he's not the greatest athlete, and I think that Brandon Cooks does still have enough left in the tank to deliver as the 90th overall player. Jalen Tolbert, who again I'm going to be higher than the staff on him, but he hasn't shown us anything, and he's like locked in as their number 3 receiver for a team that's going to throw this much and has this little of really talent in the pass catcher core. Like we have a guy here who has proven that he can have big seasons in Brandon Cooks. Like he's a guy I want to be above market on for sure.
Yeah. Brandon Cooks will be 31 in September, but like Evan said, they don't really have a choice. And I agree that they're going to throw the ball a ton. They were 6th in pass rate over expectation last year. When your running backs are Zeke and Rico Dowdle, that could go up. So Jalen Tolbert is a late round sleeper. I like. We're going to make a move on him in the staff ranks, and we'll get higher on Jalen Tolbert. I certainly like that one. The Zeke stuff is interesting. Zeke, 93rd overall for Evan. ETR ranks at 120. Now, we are still baking in some unlisted. In other words, they could still add someone. So if they don't add someone and we keep kind of taking away the unlisted as weeks go by, and it makes it less likely they sign someone. But if they don't sign someone, we'll end up higher on Zeke. Evan, what do you think about Cowboys backfield? This is obviously a mess. I think people are pretty surprised that they didn't do something in the draft or free agency or something.
For sure. That's cool that you guys do the unlisted thing in the stat projections, and that makes a ton of sense. But what I do is I rank the guys, and then if the Cowboys bring somebody else in, then I'll just move them down. So that's just kind of 2 different approaches to doing fantasy football rankings. It's not like I want to draft Ezekiel Elliott or anything, but once you get to like almost pick 100 and you have a guy who is the heavy favorite to lead his team in touches, even though he is an undeniable plotter, I think you pull the trigger that late in the draft. And I think he does make sense as a 0 RB pick as well.
So touches I'm not that interested in, but Zeke last year, if you guys remember, we were projecting Zeke for like 5 catches a game down the stretch last year. I mean, he was the Patriots' best pass catcher down the stretch. And then we also know that Zeke,
and then if they throw the ball a ton, like he's going to benefit from that.
I mean, you would agree that Zeke, even in this state, is probably a better pass catcher than Dowdle, right?
Yeah, I think that Dowdle is a good pass protector.
Okay.
But they've always loved Zeke's pass protection.
Exactly. And then also, I don't think Zeke, like a carry for Zeke from his own 40-yard line is worth like nothing. He's never going to break an explosive play. But teams love using him around the goal line. And so, catching the football and scoring touchdowns, that's the bull case for Zeke. But man, it is not an exciting click. All right. Let's get to some sleepers here that Evan's higher on than ETR staff. First one I like. I already mentioned Marshawn Lloyd. Evan is up at 117 overall. ETR ranks at 152. We're going to look at getting Marshawn Lloyd a little bit higher, I think, based on what Evan's saying here, because I definitely like this. I like being higher on Marshawn Lloyd than I guess I would at taking Josh Jacobs very early in the second round. But yeah, we already talked about this a little bit, Evan, but anything to add on Marshawn Lloyd here?
When I do the 150, one thing I like to do is kind of stack in the like 110 to 150 range a bunch of backup running backs with upside. And Marshawn Lynch ran 4.46 at 220 pounds. He can catch the football, and he entered an offense that gives him a ton of ceiling if he were to capture that opportunity to play a lot. I don't think he's going to give you any standalone value as long as Josh Jacobs is healthy. But if something happens to Josh Jacobs, and that happens at the running back position, Marshawn Lloyd could be like a legit league winner.
Yeah.
This is also the range where I like guys like Khalil Herbert a little bit. Ty Chandler, I think, is a guy that I'm going to have on a lot of teams. Kendre Miller, Jerome Ford. I like to have those guys squarely on my radar for the late rounds of the draft because they provide upside.
For sure. Oh, you mentioned Kendre Miller. Let's talk about him for a second. Kendre Miller, 124 for Evan. ETR rank is 189. I kind of want to get higher in Kendre Miller. Similar to AJ Dillon, I kind of think that Jamal Williams is just going to get dusted, right? Like, I understand Jamal Williams is a great dude. He does the sex video. He quote tweeted me on Instagram. We're close personal friends, but he's not that good at football. He happened to fall into the end zone a ridiculous amount of times for Evan's 100-1 bet in 2022. But Kendre Miller should be running circles around this guy, right? So how do you think about Kendre Miller in the Saints backfield this year?
Well, I talked to Underhill, and he thinks that the Saints want Kendre Miller to emerge as sort of their lead back this year, and then they can move on from Alvin Kamara, who's 29 now.
Yeah.
They can move on from Alvin Kamara after this season. Kendre Miller apparently was killing it in training camp last year. Then he gets hurt, kind of, falls out of, doesn't get on the field. But he's got a lot of ability. He's so fun to watch. You go back and watch his college stuff. He's a really fun runner to watch. And I think that the Saints are really internally high on him. And he's another guy that, hey, if he catches a break, he can make a difference in fantasy. And those are the types of guys that I like to stack here in this range.
I mean, if I was coaching the Saints, I would have Alvin Kamara in like some type of Jahmyr Gibbs-ish role. Alvin Kamara can really catch the football still. 75 balls in 13 games from Derek Carr last year, who we know absolutely loves to check it down. But Kendre Miller as a runner, probably more effective than Alvin Kamara at this point in their respective careers. So I'm actually excited for Kendre. We're going to look at moving him up also. All right. Here's a controversial one. Our Slack exploded today because we were debating Ray Davis versus Ty Johnson. Yes, it is a pathetic life, but it's one that we love. We just spent an hour this morning debating Ray Davis versus Ty Johnson. Evan has Ray Davis at 126 overall. ETR rank is at 241 overall. The reason that we had him at 241 overall is we are not even sure that Ray Davis is going to completely eclipse Ty Johnson. Evan, any thoughts on Bill's backfield where James Cook at least seems entrenched as the feature back?
Yeah, I mean, James Cook had 1,600 total. He had almost 16. No, he had around 1,600 total yards last season. But they don't like the way that he runs between the tackles, and that's why they drafted Ray Davis, who was one of the best between the tackles runners in college football last year. I mean, I've heard that Joe Brady, their OC now, was banging the table for the Bills to draft Ray Davis far ahead of where they wound up getting him. And then we talked to Joe Buscaglia, the longtime awesome beat writer for the Bills, and he thinks that Ty Johnson might play an annoying amount, and that would obviously hurt Ray Davis. But again, at this stage of the draft, I mean, we're at pick 126 overall. Oh my God, the staff has him at 241. At this stage of the draft, these are the types of players I like to put at the very end of my bench. And if something happens to the starter, or this dude tears it up in training camp / preseason and earns a bigger role in a very, an offense that can score a lot of points, this is where I'm willing to take a chance on a guy like that.
I mean, I'm more on Evan's side here. Ty Johnson will be 27 in September. He's on his 1, 2, 3, third team. I know he had some meaningful carries for them down the stretch last year, but man, Ray Davis, I know a 4th round pick doesn't sound like a ton, but in the current running back landscape, it's certainly not insignificant. And a lot of people had, Scout Bros, some of them really liked Ray Davis. So that's one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, we had Renner on, and he had him as a top 5 back in the draft.
Yeah, it was Renner's 5th running back in this class. We will be moving up Ray Davis some from our rankings. We're not going to completely assume that he takes over for Ty Johnson as the RB2, but we're going to lean it that way for sure. All right. Interesting one here from Evan. Mondale Moore, 135 overall for Evan. ETR staff way lower at 260. I've actually been taking Mondale Moore as my last round in Kirk Cousins stacks. I don't take him as a one-off, but in best ball, I've been taking Mondale Moore 20th round, 18th round when I already have Kirk Cousins. But yeah, Evan, it's not interesting setup for Rondale here with Kirk Cousins coming over. What do you think about him?
Yeah, so the pass rate in Atlanta is going to obviously skyrocket,
Yeah.
going from Desmond Ritter to Kirk Cousins, and you got the floor of Michael Penix, sitting there on the bench. So that's nice. Zach Robinson comes from, he was with the Rams under Sean McVay, where they would give the ball to receivers in the running game a lot. You remember Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua gets the ball, as a ball carrier, and Rondale Moore can definitely do that. I mean, I've always thought that he should, maybe put on 10, 15 pounds and become a running back.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the very least, it seems like he is going to be locked into 3 receiver sets. And this is going to be an 11 personnel team. Again, Zach Robinson, Sean McVay, they have Kyle Pitts, and they got like Charlie Warner. They're not going to become a 12 personnel team. They're going to be an 11 personnel team. And there is nothing in terms of depth behind Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Rondale Moore.
Yeah.
So on paper, at least, it looks like he could play a lot more, and they did trade for him.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, at least, it looks like he could play. He could wind up playing a lot, and he has shown us big playability, even though he's been, somewhat disappointing overall.
Yeah. My biggest concern, and I like this. I think we're going to look to move him up also. My biggest concern on this is that he was often outplayed by Greg Dortch in Arizona. And like, that's scary to me. That's certainly scary. But that's why he's available almost free. Like, he doesn't even get drafted in a bunch of leagues. All right. 20th and final discrepancy we're going to talk about here today is Brian Robinson. Evan is lower than ETR staff on Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, 140th overall for Evan, the RB 50. ETR staff up at 102, the RB 34. I thought Brian Robinson handled himself well last year, especially in the pass game. I did not expect him to catch 36 balls on 43 targets and score 4 receiving touchdowns. Maybe that's a little bit fluky. But anyways, they replaced Antonio Gibson with an aging Austin Eckler. Evan, what do you think about how this Washington backfield plays out and why you're lower on B-Rob?
Yeah, and I'm lower on B-Rob for the second consecutive year, and I was wrong last year. I remember you were like quite high on
Yeah,
him.
I took him a ton, yeah.
Yeah, and you nailed that. I didn't take Brian Robinson like at all, didn't really want him, and he had a really nice season. There's a completely new regime in Washington with no ties to Brian Robinson. They paid Austin Eckler. It wasn't a lot of money. I think it was $4.5 million a year. But I mean, Austin Eckler is going to play a lot.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how it's going to happen for Brian Robinson, barring an injury to Austin Eckler. He has no pass game upside with Austin Eckler there. He did show that he could compete in the passing game last year, which he did very little of at Alabama. But I don't know. I don't think he's super talented, and they got Austin Eckler, and that's maybe the extent of the analysis.
Yeah, I mean, Evan is up way higher on Eckler than B-Rob. I think the consensus is kind of that, like, Eckler's done. Like, people keep showing that clip of Eckler running, and I think that clip is ridiculously unfair to him. He was hurt. It's one play, but he looks like outrageously slow. And people are like, Eckler's done. I don't know that I buy that. This dude's in incredible shape. However, if he is done, I'm extending the invite here for Austin Eckler to join the ETR staff as a fantasy analyst, where I know he's very interested. But yeah, what do you think about the narrative that Eckler's just toast, Evan?
I mean, I understand it. Watching those clips, it's brutal. It's painful to watch, especially for a dude that over the previous 2 seasons before that had led the NFL in touchdowns. How many times have we talked about the high ankle sprain?
Yeah.
He had one. It was in week 1, wasn't it?
Something like that. Yeah,
It was really early
Yeah.
in the season that he suffered a high ankle sprain. That just will kill your year. You can come back, think you're ready. You lose juice. I mean, you lose cutting ability. High ankle sprains are the worst because in fantasy, I mean, I'd rather have a dude tear his ACL
Yeah.
than suffer a high ankle sprain, because then he comes back, you're like, oh, should I play him? Oh my God, he looks terrible. Like, it's a disaster of an injury. And I'm chalking it up to that.
All right. That is going to do it for this launch party for Evan Silva's first top 150 of the 2024 NFL season. You can find that on the site right now. We, of course, will miss Evan over the next 1 to 2 months, but clearly, obviously, completely doing the right thing. Evan's not going to have access to phone internet. I'm sure a bunch of you want to send him messages or whatever. Not going to be able to do that. I don't think, Evan, right? No phone, no computer. Is that right?
Yeah, people are going to think I'm going to prison. I mean, no, I'm going to detach. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to prison.
I wanted to, I know it's not prison. I wanted to be able to call Evan. He said, you can send me a letter. I said, I haven't sent a letter since I was freaking 6 years old. But all right. Anyways, happy for you, buddy. Love you. Be good. And we'll see you on the flip side. For Evan, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.